From the CISO Series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
HP warns of hard-coded passwords, AI tool wipes out company database, oops, and Clorox wipes up suppliers' security mess. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have selected from this past week's cybersecurity headlines, and we are now looking forward to some insight, some opinion, and indeed some expertise from our returning guest, Nick Espinosa, host of the nationally syndicated Deep Dive radio show. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. Got to ask, how was your week in cybersecurity?
Well, with what we're going to be talking about, it was absolutely nuts. Although I did just find out a fighter plane crashed into a school. So thank you very much for that news, our producer.
It helps put everything into context for how your week is going. So that is, that is the bar that hopefully all this news comes below. Before we move on into the news, got to thank our sponsor for today, Nudge Security. Secure the workforce edge. If you're listening to the show as a podcast, meaning you're not watching it live, remember that next week you too can join our loyal band of vocal experts on YouTube Live. Do so. Go to CISOSeries.com, hit the old events drop down, and look for the cybersecurity headlines week in review image. If you click on it, you can join us and have a good time. Join CCL and Kevin Farrells, two of our regulars, already getting into it in the chat, exchanging pleasantries at this point, but who knows what is to come. Remember, if you are joining us live, get in that chat, have some fun. Some frivolity may occur. Warning. And if you're not into the whole chat experience, send us an email, feedback@CISOSeries.com. Let us know what you think about the show, what you think about the news, or indeed what you think about life, I guess. I don't know how to process that, but I will do my best. Before we get into the news, again, just a quick reminder that the opinions that Nick are about to share are, in fact, his own, not necessarily those of an employer, work, affiliates, friends, family, or indeed enemies. We've got about 20 minutes, so let's get started. First up here, Hewlett-Packard warns of hard-coded passwords in Aruba access points. This warning refers to hard-coded credentials in Aruba instant-on access points, which are compact, plug-and-play Wi-Fi devices designed primarily for small and medium businesses, offering enterprise-grade features like guest networks and traffic segmentation, although not hard-coded passwords is also included in there, with cloud and mobile app management. The existence of hard-coded access points means that attackers can bypass normal device authentication and access the web interface. The issue has a CVE number as well as a critical CVSS score of 9.8. So, Nick, I guess this story just kind of wrote its own question here, so I'll just read it again. The existence of hard-coded access points means that attackers can bypass normal device authentication and access the web interface. That's like real bad. What role would a hard-coded access point password play at this point?
Okay, I mean,
make the case. Can you make the case? Is there any reason this should be here?
No, just no. I mean, okay, so outside of hard-coded credentials being so 2012, I mean, come on, HP, Aruba, you're not a startup. You know, this just underscores why it's bad practice, right? Because think about it. If that hard code password leaks, and it just did, hello CVSS score, then every deployed device with that firmware is screwed, right? They're all exposed in that kind of stuff. And so the instant on, I mean, I understand it. It's designed for ease of deployment. So it's managed via like a mobile app or the cloud that HP provides, all that kind of stuff. But this just increases the attack surface. So I really think it comes down to, if I'm thinking about this through, like the balance of making it easier for the user to deploy. And Lord knows you can go to like your local retail store, get something that's very easy to do and configure and go live. But then we end up with these kinds of problems, right? So it's that versus having proper security. So if I'm thinking about it, think about the risk footprint of this, right? Small to mid-sized business are going to be buying these because they're easier to install. And oftentimes they don't have dedicated security teams, right? You know, maybe they're outsourcing, maybe they got one person on staff. And so vulnerability detection and mitigation of this are slower. So these things are going to be hanging out there forever, right? How many people are actually going and reading about these things or looking up their products or even running proper patch management on their infrastructure? It's one thing to like patch a Windows machine, right? It's another thing to like actually log into your access points and say, hey, let's do some rolling upgrades across the network. You know, a lot of them just don't do that, you know, not to mention compliance violations. Lord, you know, I mean, everybody's going to throw HP under the bus for this one, you know, and if they're caught with this. But my fear here is that they've got a bazillion Aruba products out there. This may be the first one we find, but not the last necessarily. And is everybody going to get the memo? And are they going to get the memo ASAP? No. I mean, look at Log4j, right? Look at all the fun Klopp had with that. I mean, these are the kinds of things that keep me up at night, as a nerd. Absolutely nuts.
CCL in our chat. Will no one think about the devs? And yeah, this is one of those things where, when we talk about like things like secure by design, like to your point, I completely understand that this is mobile, so ease of use has to be like part of the design process, but like it should never be on the table. Should you have a hard coded password for something like this? So yeah, that's the disconnect there.
Right. Well, and part of it too could be, hey, like the password is, look at the serial number on the box, and then it forces you to change the password. Hopefully not to password, but these are things that we should be considering and baking in. And I understand in terms of the devs, right? I mean shortcuts are shortcuts, but you know what? Sometimes the children need to learn, and they need to learn the right way. So there you go.
All right, next up here, this is one of the big stories of the week. AI tool wipes out company database. A company called Replit has a new coding assistant designed to help automate software development, a very familiar use case for all of these emerging LLM tools. Unfortunately, this assistant accidentally wiped an entire production database for a SaaS company during a live test. Despite being under a code freeze, the AI ignored commands, deleted critical data for over 1,200 executives and 1,100 companies, and then made things worse by fabricating thousands of fake users and lying about what it had done. So Nick, Replit's CEO Ahmad Masad called it a catastrophic failure. So props for not sugarcoating it, I guess. But there's just so many bad things that happened in this incident. Which one piques your interest? A lot of threads to pull at here.
And you're trying to tell me that Terminator is not an actual documentary about our future, right? I mean,
this is
the evidence is everywhere. We're going to look back at this. Dude, when I read about this one, like, I just shook my head. I mean, my first thought was, why doesn't this guy have a backup? Just a backup of your dev environment? I mean, that, like, my God. But let's dive deeper into this one, because if we're talking about like just piquing our interest here, I think this one speaks to the systemic issue that we have with AI just in general, right? We are not properly putting frameworks around their use, and then we're not educating the developers and everyone else, for the record, on how to actually use these things properly. So in this case, I think if I'm really thinking about this, I think the following things are true about Replit's AI here. It had too much access to the production system, and there was no like environmental level isolation. Where's the RBAC, right? The role-based access control, right? Like operational kill switches, somebody just pull the plug if it's going off the rails. There's none of that. Obviously, it violated code freeze policies. So that's a lack of constraint and enforcement and override protections. I mean, this is like, that hallucination is like crackhead level, right? I mean, that's crackhead hallucination right there. And it literally created a ton of fake users. So it's clearly doesn't have guardrails. I think this is a huge issue. But here's the thing. I think while Replit, they're going to take a whole lot of this. This is also a shared responsibility, right?
Yes.
Replit they have the responsibility to put out products that are heavily vetted, adhere to DevOps best practices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The AI should never have been connected to a production environment without some kind of isolation layer, right? But it's also the responsibility of this developer and the organizations that are going to get this thing to do proper vetting and due diligence on the products that they use. Moving fast and breaking things does not work, and this really underscores it, right? And we just had another one, right, with Amazon.
Oh yeah,
in that the Amazon Q thing. So this is a systemic issue, whether you're massive like Amazon or HP Aruba, or Replit starting up, just murdering databases and creating fake users to lie about it. Like, this is a big issue.
Well, and this is the salacious headline, right? Like, this is, if you're an AI hater, this is proof of everything that you've been warning about. But to your point about the shared responsibility model, this so much reminds me of early days of SaaS, right? Where it was like, oh, we don't need backups. It's in the cloud.
Right.
Like they're already, we didn't actually read the terms of service to know, what's what their availability is and that kind of stuff. And I was kind of on the ground with an IT media company, so I like saw companies reacting to this in real time of educating consumers about what their responsibilities are when they're consuming these services. So I think, yeah, we're definitely early in that curve with LLMs too.
Right,
sure.
right. I mean, and look at Microsoft email. Everybody just assumes, oh, they're backing it up. No, they're giving you retention once you empty your deleted items. And after 30, 60 days or whatever, it's gone. And people don't do their due diligence on this. They don't understand these things. And I think it really just behooves organizations to do their due diligence on this kind of stuff, especially in the AI space. Moving fast and breaking things really is the mantra here. It's been Silicon Valley's mantra since Zuckerberg, right? Really started Facebook. So, lesson learned. And I hope
things
people
at
did
scale.
learn the lesson. What?
Breaking things at scale. So who knew?
Right. Ooh, yikes.
All right. Next up here, let's disinfect ourselves of this. Clorox wipes suppliers mess. IT services provider Cognizant is being sued by Clorox for negligence in a $380 million lawsuit after threat actors from the Scattered Spider Group reportedly gained access simply by calling the service desk and requesting password and MFA resets with no authentication checks. In one excerpt, the attacker says, "I don't have a password, so I can't connect." And the Cognizant agent responded with, "Oh, okay, let me provide the password to you." Okay. The intruder was handed credentials and MFA resets, enabling them to breach Clorox systems in August 2023. It's not even a breach then at that point. It's just they used the legitimate credentials. The complaint was also accused Cognizant of delaying containment, failing to deactivate compromised accounts, and improperly restoring data. Cognizant said its role was limited to help desk services and didn't cover cybersecurity. So, Nick, I must remember to use this next time I want to steal some money. Let's see. I don't have a password, so I can't connect. To be fair to Cognizant, they say its role was limited to help desk services. They didn't cover cybersecurity, which only seems to make the whole story worse, I guess, than don't hand out passwords, I guess. Which part of this mess do you want to focus on?
I mean, so when you've got a win or a loss, it's a team effort, right? And in this case, it's a team effort. Everybody at Cognizant was working together to really screw this one up because, like, if you think about it, the very first thing I thought about this one was security theater, right? I mean, the service desk literally failed on step one. No identity verification, no escalation. If you can't verify, no second factor. When anybody calls a help desk and says, "I don't have a password," and the response is, "Okay, I'll give you one," that's, that's UAS, right? That's UAS. That's unauthorized access as a service. That's what that is. Unauthorized access as a service. And it's just head shaking. I mean, it's containment, right? It's containment 101. So think about it this way. The lawsuit accuses Cognizant of delaying containment of active intrusion, failing to revoke compromised accounts, and then to put a cherry on top of this entire poop cake, they performed data restoration improperly, for all of this. And so, it really did take all of them just screwing this up. And so this is negligence. This is breach of contract. This is everything. And I think also, if I'm thinking about big picture here, this also really underscores that there's no real industry standards for MSPs. Like, yeah, they can go get like a SOC 2 or an ISO 27001, but it's not required. Anybody can put up a shingle and claim they're an MSP. And I've seen some serious disasters as a result of this, but there's some really good ones out there drinking Kool-Aid and the Kool-Aid for cybersecurity. But a company like Cognizant to say, "Oh, well, our help desk isn't, security based." Dude, you're giving away passwords.
Yeah, what part of your playbook had giveaway passwords as one? Like, where did that go in the flow chart of helping somebody? Like,
I did not have that on my cybersecurity disaster bingo scorecard for this week. But like, that's just like unbelievable. I just like really.
It's yes, we'll see if there's any fallout to that. You can keep tuned to cybersecurity headlines if there's any update on that lawsuit. Before we move on to our next story, we have to spend a few moments and thank our sponsor for today, Nudge Security. Here's the thing. Your employees are signing up for new apps, sharing data, and connecting tools together, often without anyone knowing. What if you could continuously discover when people start using new apps or sharing data, then prompt them with security guidance right when and where they are working? At Nudge Security, they call that securing the workforce edge. Instead of trying to control everything, which, let's face it, is impossible, they give IT and security teams the visibility they need and automation to guide employees towards secure behaviors. The result? Your workforce stays productive, your data stays secure, and you can finally get some sleep at night. Learn more at nudgesecurity.com/workforceedge. That's NUDGESECURITY.com/workforceedge. All right, next up here, Arizona election officials avoided CISA after attack. On June 23rd, Arizona's Secretary of State's office became aware of a defacement attack against its election site, with candidate photos replaced with images of the late Iranian Ayatollah Khomeini. The attack impacted a legacy system that had no access to voter rolls, so there was no threat to those systems. Through its State Department of Homeland Security office, Arizona officials contacted federal agencies like the FBI about the attack, but this did not include outreach to CISA. Secretary of State Adrian Fontes said initial attempts to establish a relationship with Homeland Security initial attempts to establish a relationship with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem earlier this year were dismissed outright. CISO for Arizona Secretary of State Michael Moore clarified the state has no direct level of support from CISA since the end of 2024, saying right now in 2025, we have no federal cybersecurity advisors. So, Nick, here we're starting to really see the effects of the deprecation of CISA. Notably, they've been very vocal in saying they are getting out of the election, security game as an agency. Without getting political here, how does this make you feel when the fabric of national security around election systems seem to be, sprouting some holes?
Yeah. Now, first things first. I think it would be amusing if this ended up being like the North Koreans and they decided to use the Ayatollah's image to throw everybody off the trail because everybody thinks it's the Iranians. Just throwing that out there, because why not, right? But let me put my default preamble that I say on my radio show constantly when I'm talking about these kinds of things. Cybersecurity is agnostic to politics, but we're not immune from it. Right? We get dragged into this. And this is basically like a low sophistication defacement, all of that. And, obviously this also shows about legacy infrastructure risks with known vulnerabilities and all of that. But let's focus essentially on, your question here, because this really underscores that the US has gaps in federal coordination right now. As a result of it, a lack of CISA involvement limits intelligence sharing and response collaboration. We are best in cybersecurity when we are communicating with each other. Look at groups out there like the CTA, where you have competitors in, let's say, the firewall space or the threat detection space, sharing threat intelligence, knowing that a rising tide raises all boats. Don't forget that CISA is the primary federal agency designed for election system protection, even though they're rolling these things back, which means there is no basic federal response as a result of this. And the Secretary of State Fontes from Arizona basically cited a failed outreach attempt to Secretary Noem. And so that does kind of indicate some type of political or bureaucratic friction. Is it a failure of communication? Like, we don't necessarily know. And so that's a problem. And it's beyond important to understand this, because any disruption in the election process, especially in a swing state like Arizona, has always been in play in the last 3, 4, 5 elections, where you see a lot of concentration of voters on both sides, right? And so, God forbid Iran or Russia or China or any other threat actor that we have, and take your pick on the list, interpret this disunity within the U.S. cybersecurity defensive lines as something that could encourage them, right, to be more aggressive with pre-election interference campaigns, hacking elections, all this kind of stuff. Democracies run on solid democratic elections and secure elections. And quite frankly, it's something that we need to safeguard every which way. And so it's really depressing to see this. And again, we're agnostic here in cybersecurity to politics, but we're not immune from it. And I think Arizona just proved that point.
Yeah, I think this is really to your point about raising the flag for yes, this was a technical exploit against this one legacy system. That is a technical vulnerability, but we're increasingly seeing threat actors targeting business logic, right? As a prime factor for doing this. And this is just a big flare in the sky that says there is a fundamental lack of coordination. There is a lack of a central head for these kinds of things. So even if it's Arizona is able to recover from this relatively quickly, this only impacted this only impacted candidate information relatively far away from an election. Not it's not the end of the world. However,
wasn't voter rolls.
Exactly. But once you get to that, that there is even just a lack of unified response, right? There's going to be some kind of lag, whether who you're talking to, is it state resources, is it federal resources?
Right.
That's the kind of stuff that right by an election could have a big impact when hours could count at that point.
Right. Well, but think about it also from the state's perspective. I don't care if it's Arizona or California, Illinois or Florida or wherever.
Yeah.
If these officials, especially in cybersecurity, are like, we're on our own, Like that's it. And we all know that cybersecurity is underfunded, whether it's private or public. If you can't rely on that greater resource, that can, send in the cavalry when something happens, that's a problem. There's no backup. And so when you've got something like this, especially when you're talking about something as critical as an election, it's of concern. It's the same on the same side of the natural disasters in FEMA, right? If FEMA's not there and you have a natural disaster, we know historically the states have been terrible at taking care of this, which is why FEMA was created in the first place, right? So, and again, that's not getting political. It's just, we're all in it to help each other in this industry, and to not have that help when you need it's a pretty lonely place to be.
All right, moving on to our last story of the day. Kevin Farrell in our chat, you are officially out of timeout. You can come back out, start engaging again. No, I'm just kidding. We love seeing everybody active in there. Keep it up. As long as you're civil, I don't care where you take the conversation in there as well. Our last story here. Contract Labs leaves critical infrastructure cybersecurity sensor data unanalyzed at National Lab. A critical contract supporting DHS's Cyber Sentry program at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory expired, leaving threat detection data from key infrastructure networks unanalyzed. The labs, revealed during a House hearing on operational technology cybersecurity, hinders monitoring of emerging threats in OT environments, which traditionally we barely have a handle on anyway. Experts warn that under-resourcing of OT security, compounded by recent federal budget cuts, poses a significant risk to national cybersecurity. So, Nick, we've seen stories like this before where an organization somehow forgets to renew a domain or a contract or a supplier. And like so many of these events, it is yet to be determined whether a person forgot, was told to forget. We don't, the details are still being sorted out here. But do you feel this story, just like we were talking about with CISA, is starting to show, some larger organizational failure? Or is this, hey, let's tear things out, and when things start breaking, then we'll put them back in?
We're just turning this into a 12-step meeting here, aren't we? All right. Jesus. Okay. So let's talk about this, because I do think that this is really underscoring some cracks that we're starting to see in CISA. I mean, I think these stories, and just the one we literally just talked about with Arizona, just kind of prove this. And I don't want to start with that necessarily, because I think we have to talk about the Cyber Sentry program itself, because I don't know if the entire audience knows about this, and it is super, super important. So it's part of CISA's effort to provide near real-time intrusion detection on ICS, industrial control systems, OT, all that kind of stuff. So we are talking about an actual push from CISA historically to defend things like power grids, water systems, chemical plants. We know, for example, with water, we have over 50,000 water and wastewater districts, and something like 60 to 70% of them are terribly, terribly staffed in terms of defensive capabilities and just knowledgeable people in cybersecurity, right? Let alone certified. So in a nutshell, is basically Cyber Sentry involves placing sensor arrays that feed telemetry to security analysts. And so with that lapse, a couple of things simply just have to be true. Data continues to be collected, but it's not going to be analyzed. So great, my firewall's logging left and right, but if it's screaming help, 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 and nobody's looking at it, then what good is that, right? On top of it, it also means we have delayed threat detection. We have missed IOCs or indicators of compromise, so we have reduced incident response time as well. That's essentially what's going to happen, is we're going to just take more time to respond because we're not seeing APTs potentially, or, something even easier. And that's a big issue. So these OT systems are some of the worst things that we have to deal with for data security and properly secure. I mean, my God, how many systems in manufacturing, were put in when the Macarena was popular, and they're still running them, right? Because nobody updates these things because they don't break. You know what I mean? So this is a high impact issue to critical sectors in the system. And so basically the national security and strategic implications here, I think, are absolutely huge. So think again about the Russia, Chinas, and Irans of the world. They can exploit these gaps. They can stage attacks in OT environments that are essentially going unnoticed now. So this is a huge thing. But it really underscores why CISA is beyond critical to U.S. interests, and to see them lose talent, budget, reduce their staff, all this kind of stuff, when the world is getting more and more threat from online sources, from nation state actors, all the way down to the 15-year-old kid in a laptop that watches the worst YouTube videos. You'll find this is nowhere that we want to be as a country. And so I think it's a huge, huge problem. I really do.
And these problems are tough enough when everything is working right, and to have it be literally just a contract not renewed, right? It's like an existing program that was serving a mission, to your point. And then you're also you're wasting effort on the collection side, right? You're collecting and storing all those logs that then are just essentially, I mean, there's historic data. Sure, I'm sure if there's indicators of compromise, obviously you need to know about them if they can analyze them later. But like the value of those is to find them as quickly as possible, not for necessarily historic data. So it really is very frustrating when you see this was doing a job. Maybe not. Who's to say if it's working at optimal efficiency, if it couldn't be improved? That's a totally separate conversation. But to just have it cut off seemingly over a bureaucratic lapse is very frustrating.
Yeah, it is frustrating. And CISA's offered some really great programs over the years. Like a lot of companies didn't know, you could get free vulnerability testing externally from them. You could sign up for it. Like these are things that as they are tracking the threat actors of the world and looking at things like integrity of the election, they are trying to protect the critical infrastructure in the United States and the private sector as well. So losing that is just makes us less whole as a cybersecurity community, because we're getting less threat telemetry, but it makes us less secure as a nation as well. So I'm not a fan of this by any stretch, and I'm really hoping it changes.
All right, well, we have to get out of here in just a few moments, but before we do, I want to thank everybody for contributing in our chat. We had Kevin Farrell having some fun in there. CCL was suggesting for our last story there, we can just, why don't we just get AI to find, correlate, and analyze all those logs? Problem solved. It's no big deal. We can just throw them all into ChatGPT.
Well, when it starts wiping firmware and then lying about it, you come talk to me.
Well, yeah, we'll get Replit right on that to try and get that on there.
Deploy Replit. We'll be safe. We'll be down. It'll be great.
Hey, if there's no logs, no indicators of compromise. What I'm hearing.
Machines don't work. You can't get hit. All
right. Before we're doing best bad idea. This is the wrong show. Super Cyber Fridays, where you can find all of those. Nick, before we get out of here, was there any story that seems like a lot of facepalm stories today? Was there anyone that was the topper for you this week?
Yeah. I mean, and some of the stuff that we didn't get to was like the calm, like those kids, like the minors that basically no fear of the law, try jailing a juvenile, and they're being put to work by groups like Scattered Spider and all that kind of stuff. I think that's one of the things that longitudinally we're going to have a huge issue with, because that's a big problem. But yeah, that other than that, I think we covered a lot of good ground. I mean, I don't know if I want to call it good, but a lot of important stories. Let's put it that way.
Well, thank you so much, Nick Espinosa, host of the nationally syndicated Deep Dive radio show. Where can people find you on the cyberspace if they're so inclined to follow more of what you're up to?
Yeah. You can find me at YouTube or LinkedIn /Nick Espinosa. Hopefully I'm on a public radio or NPR affiliate near you, if you're in the United States or some parts of Canada, although it's not public radio up there technically the same way. Anyway, you can find me those places and come say hi, come hang out.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much once again, Nick. Always a pleasure. We'll have to have you back on really soon. Thanks also to our sponsor for today, Nudge Security brings, hold on, I need to update that. We'll get that right. Thanks to our sponsor, Nudge Security, secure the workforce edge. Also want to thank everybody in our chat once again. Schmooze, just one of our new regulars, I think, in there as well, along with Kevin Farrell, CCL. Big Boss Man David Spark will be back in a couple of weeks, I think, so we can look forward to seeing him in there as well. Always fun to see the crew. And if you want to join us, remember, we're streaming on YouTube every single Friday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern, so make sure you get in there and have some fun. Don't forget, you can also send us feedback at CISOseries.com. It's an electronic mail address. I don't know if you're aware of this. You can send messages. It's kind of like the mail, but it's electronic, and we don't charge for postage. Remember to please join us next week. First, we've got Super Cyber Friday, where the topic will be hacking the talent myth. An hour of critical thinking about why the skill shortage might just be a hiring problem. I'll be hosting that. That starts at 1 p.m. Eastern. And then come on back for another episode of the Week in Review at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Head on over to CISOseries.com. Look for the events page to register and get more information about both. In the meantime, you can still get your daily news fix every single day through cybersecurity headlines. Give us about 6 minutes. We'll get you all caught up. Until the next time we meet, for myself, for our glorious producer, Steve Prentice, for Nick Espinosa, and for all of us here at the CISO Series, here's wishing you and yours to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOSeries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.